AMEE isn't just about the conference. One of the initiatives which has been developed over the last 3 years is the post-publication peer-review journal MedEdPublish. And here to talk to us about that today is Richard Hayes, the editor. Richard, thanks for joining us.
Thanks very much, John. It's a great pleasure to be talking with you today.
So over 3 years, how would you say that the journal has been developing? How's the acceptability of this new journal been received?
Well, in the main, it's been accepted very, very well by the medical education community around the world, and the numbers of submissions is going up, and we are publishing some very interesting stuff. I guess the challenges remain for some. Citation indices and indexing are very important things around career development and promotion applications. And the good news is that in the last year we've been accepted in the Directory of Online Access Journals, DOAJ, and now every recommended paper for the last 3 years is listed and much more accessible in an open access sense. We've got some little way to go in terms of getting PubMed Central acceptance, and then after that there's the Web of Science and getting a citation index. So some of that is a little bit off, but nevertheless we're getting well supported, a lot of submissions, and some really interesting stuff is in there.
There's a lot of developments that happened during the year. Then it's been a busy year for you all. The problem, as I remember it, is that so many authors are trying to get papers published in mainline journals, and really the vast majority of them aren't. It's not possible to accept them all, and this is the niche, isn't it, into which MedEdPublish is fitting?
Yes, I think what we're trying to do is we're not quite working closely with AMEE's other journal, Medical Teacher, but the acceptance rate, as you probably know, has fallen quite dramatically in all of the main journals, and we have a higher acceptance rate, but it comes at the cost, if you like, of the peer review process being very open. So we are a post-publication peer review journal, and that means that once we accept and it goes online, then panel members review it, but any reader can log in and register and do a review or make a comment. And sometimes this can create quite an interesting debate, which others can learn from in following, but sometimes people find that the comments are very critical. So anyone who has submitted a publication to a traditional journal that's pre-publication peer review will have received comments or reviews that they disagree with or they find unnecessarily negative. What happens with MedEdPublish is all of that is quite open. And of course we train or ask our reviewers to be very constructive in their criticism, but it's still a very open process.
Yeah, and I think that's the key, isn't it? The open process is very exciting, because it does mean that I can write something which I believe passionately about and want to share with the wider community, and it's not going to be blocked or cut off immediately just because it's not long enough or it's not detailed enough or such ways as that. What are the criteria that you go through before accepting a paper for publication?
Well, the majority of rejections, and it's about 15%, are because people just make errors in the submission process. They don't submit the right things with it, and the system rejects it. Just occasionally somebody will receive a submission which appears to have nothing to do with medical education, and as editors we reserve the right to redirect that somewhere else. Sometimes the other reason is that some people are writing in their second, third or fourth language, and they really need a lot of professional language editing support before we can take it on. Because once it enters our system, it goes online quite quickly. It can be within a matter of days. So, and we do not have the in-house resources to rewrite papers or do the professional editing.
So someone who was unfamiliar with writing in written English would have to really get some help themselves and submit again.
Yes. My advice to potential authors is to put your best foot forward, put up your best possible attempt. If you're writing in a language that's not your first, and I appreciate how hard that is, then please get some help from somebody who is a native English speaker, so to speak, just to make it into nice, normal conversational English.
That's a very nice and a neat piece of guidance. What type of papers could I write that would be acceptable? What sort of categories of paper do you submit?
Well, we have 9 categories, but the majority fall under just 2. So it's either research papers or reports of innovations and new teaching methods. The second is often the most interesting. The third common area is people put up viewpoints, perspectives, personal opinions, and some of those are very, very interesting. Well researched, well put together, well written. So we are not just about research at all, we're about sharing teaching practices, innovations.
I think this is very exciting, because otherwise there's no way of getting that point of view put across in a traditional journal at all. And I always look at this as being much more like sharing something in a coffee room discussion. And a departmental.
Well, if people go online, they will find some papers have got a number of reviews, comments, responses to the reviews by the authors, and these can be very interesting discussion threads. So there's an element of social media meets academic publishing, but it is still really predominantly academic publishing outlet. We are concerned that the feedback is constructive, but accurate as possible, and that people can learn from it, respond. In fact, the whole readership can learn from what's going on.
And if I were successful in having a paper published by MedEdPublish, how can I cite that in any way in future work?
Oh yes, already some of our papers have been cited many times. We can also easily measure. Some of the easy metrics are downloads and views, and the papers may not be yet given a citation index, and it may not contribute to somebody's H factor, but we're certainly getting a lot of interactivity. We can track the numbers of downloads and views, and some of them have got thousands.
Right. Yeah. Could you give us a feel for how many papers come through? I don't know, per month, per week?
It's about 25 to 30 per month, and as I say, about 85% of those are published quite quickly.
Right. So your advice to people listening to us today would be to have a good idea, have a thought, or have a program which you want to report. Well,
I think where we fit at the moment, until we achieve the indexing in other places that we want, this is a great place to convert some of those conference presentations that you've got up your sleeve that don't quite make a high-level research paper, because we can publish quite brief articles that are to the point. And at conferences like the AMEE conference, there's a lot of interesting teaching innovations and developments going on, and they're the things that we quite enjoy receiving and publishing, just so others, a much broader audience, can see what we're doing.
That's interesting that you say that, because people tell me, AMEE puts on a big conference once a year, but in between there's really nothing. And what you're saying is that, well, actually there is, and there could be follow-up of some of the presentations in this way by turning into a journal article.
Yeah, we actually have so far had a bit of a spike in submissions after the AMEE conference, because I think people realise that this may be worth taking to another audience. Ideally, they should have not just an idea, but it should be grounded in some kind of experiential or theoretical framework, and there should be some attempt to evaluate it. So that makes for better papers.
Yes, but that's having done all the work to make my presentation, then it's not much of an extra ask, is it, to make these additions?
No, we believe it isn't. So we'd encourage people to think about that. They do need to think, though, about the review. And as I said before, authors should put their best foot forward. Please don't submit a rough draft that you just want feedback on, because the whole world can watch this process. So it's best if you put together your very best attempt, get others to read it first, make sure it makes sense, get the language right, and then submit that, because then the feedback can be much more focused on improving the paper.
That just leads me to ask another question, and maybe it's too technical, I'm not sure, but if I had submitted a paper to you and it was okay, and then I got a lot of comments and discussion afterwards from peers, and I really wanted to modify the paper, is there a way that I can resubmit it, or do you republish it again, or how does that work out?
Yes, that's a very good question, John. So the way it was designed is we want people to have an opportunity to improve the paper and make one resubmission. So we allow one resubmission within 6 months but you can't resubmit until, I think, 28 days after the original submission and having received feedback from at least 2 panel members. We had to impose some rules like that because people were making a resubmission within 2 or 3 days based on one person's comments. And it's better to not react, but to slow down, think, reflect, and then write a revision. It's really like, if you think about it, an ordinary pre-publication review journal where feedback is given to you from the authors, and you can then respond to the feedback. And we ask that you don't do that too quickly, but we've now had a number of papers resubmitted as second versions, and they're always improved.
So it's really a learning process as well for the author as well as the person who is reading it for the first time. This is this is very exciting and scholarly, isn't it, in the way you're describing it?
Well, no, we certainly believe it is very scholarly, and the process, when somebody resubmits a paper which is improved, they will get reviews and a star rating, but anyone who looks at this paper, that will become the primary citation. But everybody will look back at the comments, the reviews, the responses by the authors, and the original paper. So we are laying out the entire review publication process for our membership to observe and learn from.
Absolutely, it sounds a great learning procedure. Tell us a little bit about the people you describe as reviewers. So that, these are different from just people reading it for the first time. These are a group of people who you've selected?
Yes, we have several dozen people from around the world, and these are people who people may apply to be on the panel member. We started off with some nominated people, but now there's more of an application process. And what we require is that people have very diverse backgrounds. They're certainly not all medical. They come from other health professions, veterinary science, dentistry, physiotherapy, etc., pharmacy. But they're also biochemists, physiologists, anatomists. But we ask that they've had some research and publication experience. That's the key issue, so that they understand the review process. And what happens is that when the managing editor manages it, the reviewers are contacted instantly. So as the paper appears online, the reviewers receive an email. We also invite authors to nominate up to 4, I think it is, reviewers, not from their same institution or who are close colleagues, of course. And that is happening more and more often, although maybe not as often as we would like. So we try to get at least 2 panel member reviews, and just at the moment, while we make no guarantees, the high 90s% of published things are getting 2 panel member reviews within a couple of months. It's not always instantaneous. People sometimes are slower, and but we are achieving the targets in a high proportion of cases.
Good. Well, that's very commendable.
What will happen is there are 5 editors and associate editors. We may, of course, at any time give a review based upon our expertise as a panel member, but we tend to pick up papers that are slow to get reviews, and so papers that have been in the system for some time are more likely to get a review from one of the editorial panel. But it's not. If I were to review a paper, for instance, it's not a final decision by the journal from the editor. It's actually a personal review from me based upon my expertise.
And how different that is from the traditional journal model, isn't it? Where the review was a yes or no, and basically, and that was it. And really, 2 or 3 people could kill off a paper and it was rejected. This is very exciting, isn't it? And you've been doing this role now for several years.
Yes, well, I've been in it since the beginning, which I think is a good thing, and I want to stay the course until it's well established. I am a believer in the model. I think that I think actually everybody now agrees that online open access is what we're all going to be doing. I think before too long we'll be wondering about these journals that don't allow everybody open access. But I think that the tricky bit is the post-publication review. Not everybody likes this. It's a bit of a challenge, but other successful journals are now doing it in other disciplines as well, and other professions. And because AMEE is an educational organisation, we're very attracted to this laying out very openly the communications and the comments and the responses,
Yes.
so that everybody can learn.
And equally, whoever has made a comment, or indeed whoever has submitted a journal, has to be prepared to take the comments which it generates. And
Correct,
that's, and that's sort of life, isn't it, basically?
So there's those panel member reviews, which we get at least 2 of, sometimes more. But then any registered reader, and it's easy to be registered, all AMEE members really just have to log in, but you can, if you're not an AMEE member, you can register, then they are able to create a review as well. And at the moment, both reviews contribute to the star rating, that is both panel member and reader reviews. There's some thinking about separating those two, like some movies are rated in systems.
Yes, yeah. So looking ahead then, well, 3 years you've done, looking ahead now for the next 3 years, how do you see the journal developing? What new aspects of it are on the horizon?
Well, I think the next step is to get ourselves accepted in PubMed Central, the Web of Science, and the other kind of more challenging and more rigorous databases. Our papers are already widely accessible through the Directory of Online Access Journals, through Google Scholar and a whole range of things. But there's a lot of work at the moment going into making sure we meet all the guidelines around academic publishing, and we are. But there's been a lot of effort behind the scenes into going into that. The software's been through a version 2 redevelopment, and we're thinking about the next version, which will have a few more interesting tweaks to improve the, I guess, the interactivity between the readership and authors and editors. They're the things that we're focusing on for the next couple of years.
Well, the presentation of a paper on the website is very engaging, and it looks good.
It's a very professional looking sort of journal, and it's so easy to press the PDF if that's what you want to do, or store it on another device. So we place no restrictions on how many times it can be downloaded or disseminated, and I think these are the attractive features of future publishing.
Great. I'm sure you've sold it to many of us by talking about it so freely, Richard. Thank you. And they just show that AMEE isn't just a conference once a year event. There's all this stuff going on through the year which we can all be involved in. I think that it is very exciting. Thanks very much, Richard, for your time.
Thanks, John.